Well, hello there, you beautiful, beautiful people. How are you all on this fabulous, fabulous Sunday? That's right, Sunday. And Sunday is normally the day of rest, but look, who needs rest? Sleep is for quitters, as they say. So shall we get straight into the meat and potatoes as we talk about Bryan Kohberger, the Idaho 4 case, and the upcoming hearings. We're seeing an abundance of paperwork coming through. We're seeing hearings being set up. And I think for people who firmly have Bryan Kohberger pegged as the guilty man, I think it's just important that we take a second to appreciate and accept what has got us into the position that we're in now, and accept that this is an extraordinary case. And some people will say, well, because of the high profile of this case and, the way it is, that's kind of why we're seeing things play out the way they are. And it's more about making it a show. And it's... But look, let's cut the crap, because at the end of the day, it is what it is. It's a murder case. It's a quadruple homicide case. And irrelevant of how that's been received on social media, that shouldn't impact the way in which the system works. We've seen the Chad DUFFMAN situation and what happened there, very, very similar, although the dynamic of the family and the victims was very different. Ultimately, at its core, it was the same thing. And that is playing out very, very different than what we're seeing play out in the Idaho 4 case. We've seen countless situations where the defense team has had to reach out and request time and time again for things that are fundamental to the process, in which they have a right to be told, look, this is what we have gained from our investigation as a prosecution team, and this is what we are going to bring forward in court and present, because we believe that your client is guilty, and this is why we believe he's guilty. And it seems that is missing. That is missing. And look, I've done a short video yesterday. I've been on holiday, and I've burnt myself real bad, so it was more just to, ease myself back into it. But yeah, this case is so frustrating because people have forgotten how the system should work. The innocent until proven guilty, and the right to be given the evidence against you so you can go away with your defence and build a defence based on that information, to be able to answer the questions that are being put forward to you. We believe you were here and you did this, and this is the evidence that we have. Now, what evidence do we have that Bryan Kohberger was inside 1122 King Road, except from a knife sheath that seems to have been strategically placed, and that word has even been used, placed, right at the scene of the crime, at ground zero. And when you remove that element, and we have to address the fact it's there, but when you remove that element, what else is there? What we have, a white Hyundai Elantra, which is questionably a white Hyundai Elantra, caught on camera, but we don't have any Bryan. We don't have any absolute proof that that's his car. We have information that says that he may have switched his phone off, or his phone was off around a certain time. But how many other phones would have been off around the same time? Bearing in mind that the time with which these murders happened was the early hours of the morning. And there's so many questions that I feel that people are just... Again, this is for the camp of Bryan Kohberger is guilty as charged. There's so many things that are being ignored. So many things that are being ignored that I feel that if the dynamic of the case was slightly different, that perhaps some people specifically wouldn't be ignored. Like Dylan Mortensen, Bethany Funk. And look, I know some people get bent up out of shape when you mention these two girls because they're classed as survivors. But would you feel that way about them if they were two lads? Do you know what I mean? Teenage lads, perhaps. It's a hard one, because let's not forget, right at the point with which the grand jury indictment came through, we was at a position where Bethany Funk was being called upon to give evidence that it had been deemed she had that was exculpatory to this case. Now, Bryan Kohberger has stood silent, and he stood silent in protest of the charges against him. And some people still don't get that. They kind of think that there's some other nefarious reason, but no, it's just I'm not going along with your plan. I don't agree with this. I don't agree with the way in which this has been done. And again, like I touched on yesterday, what I was trying to get to, my point before I digressed, and that was that Bryan Kohberger should have been dealt with completely different. And there is something missing, because you think to yourself, in a situation where you've got a quadruple homicide and you've got someone who potentially drives the car which you feel is what you're looking for, why do you just not go to pull them in and have them checked? I don't get it. It seems, like I said yesterday, that someone pointed their finger at him and said, right, that's the guy, and they've had to build the case around that fact, and because they've done it that way, certain things don't match, and certain things don't gel very well, and they raise more questions, such as the time frame. And I know this has been a bone of contention for many, because there's, could this be done in this amount of time? Yes, it could, but could somebody who has never done a crime like this ever before have done it in this amount of time and been so brazen to walk into a property that had a dog, had multiple people in? You didn't really know what was going on inside the house. If you'd never been in there before, no connection, then you wouldn't have been aware of the layout. You would have half expected the doors to be locked, perhaps. How are you going to get into the doors without rousing other people? Or did you know that the doors were unlocked and you could literally just walk in? Did he walk in there thinking they were all just going to be in the lounge and he was just going to run in and do it in the communal area of the property? There's so many things that people haven't taken into consideration that would have been in the mindset and the questions that that person doing this crime would have had to have answered. That they would have gone through this scenario. This is what I've got to do. This is how I've got to do it. And I just feel that Bryan Kohberger, being the man who did it, raises so many questions that are yet to be answered. And we haven't really been given any proof whatsoever that he is indeed, without a reasonable doubt, the guy who did it. And all the defence are asking for is their proof. Come on, give us that thing that actually places him there in the house doing the crime itself. And if all you've got is this knife sheath that has DNA that could have been transferred via a third party, let's not forget that Bryan Kohberger could have indeed owned it at some point, and he could have sold it. He could have been a buyer and seller of weapons. It could have been one that he handled through a third party and it got there. Look, and I know that's a stretch, but it's a possibility. Could it have been planted? Yes, it could have been. And however much people want to stick their head in the sand and say that you're just stretching, these things don't happen, law enforcement do not always have the best intentions at the forefront of their mind. Again, I've mentioned multiple times about the Sean Doherty case and how that was ruled as self-unaliving, of a young boy who, when he was found, his arms were so tightly bound to his sides that they had to cut the belt free. Now, how did that boy get himself in that situation all by himself? But yet, law enforcement deemed it so. And there are multiple situations where law enforcement have screwed up. The John Bennett Ramsey case, very, very similar situation where law enforcement screwed that up from the very beginning. And look, they do some fantastic work. They do some fantastic work. But again, Kylie Rodney case, they didn't find her. It took Adventures with Purpose to come along and find her. And that, again, raises questions as to the effectiveness of law enforcement. And Look, guys, at the end of the day, so many things are being completely ignored with the Bryan Kohberger case, and I think that confirmation bias is rife here. And we've got in this position now where I think that too many people just expected this to go a certain way. And when he got himself the legal team that he did, that were going to raise questions, they were going to push back, they were going to play everything by the absolute book. That's when you have problems, when you as a prosecution decide that you're not going to play everything by the book. You're going to do things that perhaps pushes the boundaries of where you should be, like with the DNA profiling, etc., and the fact they want to withhold some of that information and want to use bullshit excuses as to why. You're not going to get away with it. Not with someone like Ann Taylor, who uses things like this to her advantage. But I want you to let me know, what do you think the outcome of these hearings are going to be? Is it going to be that Bryan Kohberger is going to indeed be exonerated like he had said from the beginning? Did he say it because he knew he was innocent? Or did he say it because he knew that the system would operate in a way in which it would allow him a loophole out of it? And was that his game all along? Or is he just guilty of sin? And is this just a circus? And we're seeing a situation where Ann Taylor's just doing what she do best, and that is finding loopholes, finding ways in which to make it seem like the prosecution is indeed failing to do what they should do and potentially trying to get her client out on a technicality. Let me know down below. Enjoy your Sunday, and I will catch you all in the next one.